Hey, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
So I'm fairly upbeat. I don't know why. I mean, there's lots to be doom and gloom about. There's worldwide wars. There's all sorts, there's horrible crimes. There's a lot of stuff. If you want to be down, boy, you can just look around in the anywhere on the news or social media and be all sorts of down. But I'm kind of up for some reason. So you think I'm living in a pipe dream, or are there lots of reasons to be up too?
I think you're living in Colorado. I mean,
Yeah,
if you're like me, you wake up in the morning, and if it's a really nice morning and you look over and you see those mountains and you breathe
yeah.
in, a little of the warm air with the mountain air kind of mix, and it just puts you in a good mood. So sometimes it's hard to be in a bad mood.
I think you're absolutely right. Is I think you may know I'm doing a fix and flip up in the mountains, and in about an hour from now, as soon as we hang up, I'm going to drive up the canyon above Golden, up to Black Hawk and Central City in this little cabin that we bought. And
yeah, when you do stuff like that, you don't realize you're doing about, six of the things that make human beings happy.
what road trips?
Road
Uh,
trips, you're up in nature, you're doing
yeah,
a little work, you're
yeah.
breathing mountain air, it's clear, it's not humid, it's like sunny, you're getting some sunlight. I mean, you're all those things, the smell,
Yeah.
it,
Oddly enough, they've built some new trails off the side of Highway 119 above Golden to Blackhawk,
Mhm.
and there's, I mean, really expensive trails. And so the conservative in me goes, "Oh my God, how much money? I mean, it's a bundle of money to build these high impact, beautiful trails off to the side of the highway." And on the weekends and the weekdays, not too bad.
Let's stop and pause on this because I
Yeah,
think the conservative in you should be celebrating those trails.
yeah. You'll have tell me why.
Because the celebrate those trails are doing things. That's good money. That's not adding, pension fund and healthcare. That's good infrastructure that's tying the nation together and allowing communities to enjoy the outdoors. Brings and the reason why they're high traffic is because people come from all over the world to experience it, and it's so amazing that local people will still want to go and experience it. So,
The
in,
professor,
in, and in
you've been
terms
on.
of the overall federal budget, you need to
Yeah.
recognize that projects like that are a rounding error. We could afford if we weren't being swallowed by Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, we could have world-class funding for our national parks
Well, so,
without it making
Professor,
a dent in our
Professor,
federal
you've
budget.
been on you've been in Glenwood Canyon, right? On I-70 from
Yeah.
I mean that beautiful canyon highway, a feat of nature, engineering nature to build a super highway I-70 on through that mountain canyon. But boy, is that expensive. I mean, it is crazy expensive to make it beautiful instead of just blowing tunnels through the mountains. That's a
Mhm.
good use of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, you
Are
should
those
see.
are national treasures. I
All
mean,
right.
this is like saying, I mean, the Grand. Let's take it out of Colorado and just talk about like the Grand Canyon. You know,
Oh, isn't that great?
there are certain things that are so spectacular that they have to be preserved and adorned for the benefit of all mankind.
Yeah.
And I and in terms of the size of a nation that we are, and what it would cost in terms of the overall federal budget, I,
And
that stuff is
by the way, I think it's Jefferson County open space sales tax money. Over the last 40 years, they've been a little bit of sales tax. So I think it's actually local county money that's building this.
great. And the other thing is that adds quality of life to the people who live there, plus good tourist money. I mean,
Yeah, but Professor, I'm telling you, okay, I'll agree with you here for a second. I On the weekday, I'll see a couple dozen people on the trail: bikers, skateboarders, walkers, dogs, fishermen. They're all the fishermen in there. Climbers. There's a lot of really good climbing. So there's hundreds of climbers.
yeah.
So I went there on a weekend, and I decided, and I try to pull off the road and take a half hour walk or a run or something off to the side before or after I'm doing this fix and flip. And there was one Saturday that I must have seen 500 or 1,000 people on this trail. And it wasn't like we were crowded because it's in the mountains and there's a
Mhm.
river and but because they're up on the mountains, there's climbers and there's rappellers and there's skateboarders and there's fishermen in the river. It was crazy how much humanity wasn't working there. I think it was a work day actually. And who are all these people out there enjoying nature? Shouldn't they be at work, Professor?
You know what the beautiful thing about America is we don't get to tell other people how to live their lives or what to value. You know,
Okay.
there are people who arrange their lives in such a way that they can pursue these things that aren't necessarily tied to their work, or maybe they are. You know,
Yeah,
those
maybe
people
they
could
are.
be gear testers for one of the 1,000 outdoor companies. Those people, could be pharmacy reps taking their treasured clients out. You know, we don't know what's going on with those people.
That is absolutely right. I'm so glad we started with that because it is a joy today, and I'm heading up to the mountains here shortly. So this is kind of on topic, but will you? Can you read this hat?
Grand Lake, 250 years of freedom. Yeah.
Yeah,
U.S. Constitution week.
yeah. That was my speech last year up in Grand Lake, which was also beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, we are now in primary season, and we're in the midst of it. And for the next 6 months, there's going to be all sorts of nastiness. People are going to be mad at their spouses and their dad and children, and everybody's going to be mad because they're either supporting some candidate they hate or there's going to be lots of nastiness on the internet and some in our personal lives. And for some reason, I am still thinking that all that, yes, it's important. I don't know if you saw this, but I'm in now campaign mode. I on the beginning of May for 6 months, all I'm doing is campaigning. I'm campaigning right now. All I want to do is campaign for 6 months. What do you think I'm campaigning for? Any guess? It's a trick question. You wouldn't really have a good idea, I don't think.
The Constitution.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm
I-
campaigning for America.
yeah.
It sounds, but I don't. Who else? Why is not every politician campaigning for left and right? Why are they not campaigning? It's our 250th year, Professor. Why are we not looking at what's good and also trying to solve what's bad, showing them here's what I think is bad and here's how I think it can be better? Why aren't we having that kind of discussion instead of all the stuff that we are having a discussion? I actually don't get humanity right now. I'm confused by all of us. What's going on?
You're asking why are they not campaigning that way? Because of
And why
the
are citizens
because of
tolerating
yeah,
this?
because of campaign finance reform and the structure of how both parties are um, um, uh, uh, embedded in the primary system, and the fact that the American people aren't holding them accountable for not doing so.
So we're just kind of there's some structural things to make combat.
Hmm.
And so we watch the combat and think that's how it has to be. And then we're kind of lazy. We're living our life, maybe we're just living our lives. Maybe we're not lazy. Maybe we're not apathetic until we need to. Well, and some people I'm sure are apathetic. What's the percentage vote that you think? What's your best guess on how many people are going to vote,
In the
percentage wise?
primaries.
Yeah, no, not in primaries. In the general this
Well,
fall.
here's the problem. I think that the disparity between who votes in the primaries and who votes for the election is the problem. I
Okay, go
mean,
ahead and keep going
we're
then.
going to have a massive turnout for the
Oh,
general election. It might be, I mean, anything over 50, 60%, you're talking historic levels of turnout. And I would assume that it's going to be in the 70s at least, maybe in the 80s, which means by historic levels, I think it's going to be a very high turnout year.
and what
But it
you're
will,
calling that? That's for the gubernatorial primary. Main
yeah, well,
reason?
no, for the general
Oh,
election.
general. Okay.
Yeah. And well, it's an off year, so it might be 60 to 70, but getting 60 and 70% in a off year election is still really high. But the number of people who are participating actively in the selection process for the nominees from the two parties is really low because almost all the normal people have fled. I shouldn't say this, but probably a plurality of normal people have fled the two political parties.
You're
So
talking to me. Thank you very much. You've stayed in the party. You're well. Shame on you.
Well,
Okay.
and in some ways it, it should be reversed because I'm in a state where it matters a lot less
Yeah.
because I have my governor's ballot here. I don't know if you can see this. This is page one of the
Oh my God, that is funny.
governor's ballot, because
Well,
I'm
it can't be that many.
I don't let's see if I think it goes over to page two. No, there's a lieutenant governor on the back,
How
but
many is that? I thought there were only 17 or something.
one, two, three. It's three times one, two,
Well, you should have thrown your name in the hopper.
20. So it's around 60.
Yeah. What do you
So
mean 60?
what's that?
How many?
Around 60?
60.
60.
I thought there were 17 running. You mean those
This
are
is
all
my
the
ballot.
wacko?
I'm looking at the ballot for governor. 60.
Wow. Anyway, what's your point by bringing that up? Sorry, I missed you.
Well, in other states where you don't have a completely open primary, the parties can exercise a little more control over the who gets on the ballot, whereas
Ah,
in
yeah.
California you can't. So I could still vote for any of these 60 people, regardless of my party
Yeah.
affiliation.
Okay. Yeah, and it's that gang elections or whatever that's called. Okay. So what percentage do you think are going to vote in the general?
In
60.
this fall, it's going to be in the 60s or
Okay.
70s. I
And
think
you
people
think that's
would be
healthy?
angry. Gas prices, wars, and all the immigration stuff I think, is still simmering. But I think that energy prices and inflation are gonna bring people out.
And that's a healthy number for a constitutional republic.
I
In
don't know.
North Korea, don't they get like
I
98%?
don't. So, no, maybe not. I would just say that I don't think it necessarily correlates with the health of the republic, to be honest.
The people that decide not to vote,
Yeah,
that's
I'm just
fine.
thinking back to times when the voting level was low, and we've had some pretty good presidents and elections during those times because, generally speaking, times were good and people were happy, and
So you
uh,
don't necessarily need to vote.
yeah. So in some ways. Um, Enthusiasm can be either a positive or a negative.
Yeah.
People can be enthusiastic to vote for William McKinley because they like him a lot, or they can be enthusiastic to vote against either, um, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. So,
Right.
so yeah, I would say that the number of people voting is not necessarily indicative of
That's an
something
interesting
positive
point.
or negative in the body politic.
Okay, let's go to the purpose of the show.
Yeah,
Because I'm hoping to have you give some perspective that I don't have. So I'm hoping to have you make me smarter and anyone who else listens. I asked a simple question. I tagged you just to hope you'd kind of glance at the responses. And I don't know if you had a chance to do that or not. But I posted, is the US suffering okay, good, or great in our 250th year? And I think it was like 60 answers. I mean, there was a lot of people, my friends, and there's only like five strangers, but these are real people in my real life who I know. I like them all. Did you happen to see that post? And
yeah. Well, and I thought my answer is yes.
I love that. Okay, this is good. So take a couple minutes and explain. I love that
Well,
answer.
I was gonna say, if you want to start at the bottom or the top of the list, and I'll explain to you how we are that.
I don't even know what you mean by that. So keep going.
So you said, are we good? Are we
Oh
great?
yeah, okay, I got
Yeah. So
you.
what were the options that you gave?
Well, let's see. I guess I'd rather end positive. We'll see how long this segment takes. Let's start with suffering. Is the U.S. suffering in our 250th year?
Absolutely, because we have two branches of government that are not functioning very well. We have national leadership that is the confidence in national leadership is at an all-time low. Civic education is at an all-time, I should say, a recent historic low. Literacy is at a recent historic low. Um, and as an ideological nation state, these things are, and I would say we're also not focusing at all on the big issues that are going to affect the United States and the world if they go unaddressed, and we're simply not addressing the debt, and I would say just energy. I think I sometimes sound like a child pounding my spoon on the high chair, but our failure to convert our uh, energy to something that includes a heavy use of nuclear power is really going to be holding us back in the 21st and 22nd century, you know, and we will look back, and I already do look back at the failure for us to convert to nuclear energy as the cause of so many problems in American society. And Yeah, so civic edu I mean, and if we don't fix these problems, America goes away.
It actually goes away. We
Yeah, it
stop being
ceases to exist. Yeah. I mean, and this is something I just covered it in uh, Sherman's letter to Atlanta, the people of Atlanta during the Civil War, that the failure to teach the important ideals of America, if once that happens, we've lost our reason why we exist. We're an ideological nation state, so as soon as we forget what our national ideals are, the whole country just goes away. The United States of America is just gone. It ceases to be. So in a way, these are tremendous problems that we're simply not facing right now.
So I didn't write those down, but in general terms, economically, energy policy, sociologically, morally, I mean,
Yeah.
there's just all
Our
sorts of
alliances with other, I mean,
alliances.
yeah, alliances, militarily, technology policy. I mean, how healthcare is structured, how civil service is structured, how healthcare is delivered, how pensions are delivered,
Okay,
investment.
so you're just like all the rest of my liberal friends. The United States in our 250th year is a complete and utter mess. We are suffering. Professor Tootle, PhD, history professor. Yes, we are suffering. Right?
Uh, yeah,
Okay. All
but
right. Go to the
the,
next one then.
yeah, but I was going to
U.S.
say, but
Yeah,
you
go to
need to
the next
keep asking me those other
one.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we've heard all that and we absorb that. We don't think you're BSing. We think you've rationally outlined some things we really should be concerned about, and we're not doing things right. We're suffering. And the US in our 250th year is okay.
Yeah, we should find it amazing that most Americans are living lives where they are happy, healthy, safe, prosperous, and free, and able to live lives of their own choosing, which means that the vast majority of Americans are living at a time in a place where by comparison, we are the luckiest people to have ever lived at any place, at any time in all of human history. And that's not something to be disregarded.
Okay, so Professor, the article I just heard on the news yesterday, 50% of people are really stressed about gas prices and making other sacrifices in their life. They're living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of Americans are really stressed right now because of gas. Really? So this is we're okay? And we shouldn't be stressed at a dollar increase per
If somebody
gallon
asked
changing our
me,
whole.
yes or no, are you stressed about gas prices? I would probably just answer like yes. I mean, that's a, I don't, and the idea, I mean, I make a good salary, but I still depend on my paycheck getting deposited in my bank account every month.
Right.
And if I didn't get paid for 3 months, I would be, I'm not independently wealthy living off a trust fund. I think that's an unrealistic standard to compare yourself to people who are independently wealthy and don't have to work for a living. Like that's an impossible standard.
You're saying all humans, we need to work. That's what we do. That's how we live life.
Yeah, until you have, until you can't, until you don't want to, until you can afford to stop. But I think the fact that most adults have to work is not a sign of an unhealthy civilization in any way.
So you see that same statistic and don't necessarily think that's horrible. It just is.
Yeah, I just think, and I also think I remember how people answer survey questions, which is,
Yeah.
you think about the question you are actually being asked, and then you try to give an honest answer. But if you were to ask, if you were to ask that same person, are you despondent about gas prices? Did it lead you into a spiraling depression where you don't leave your closet? They'd
Mhm.
say, oh, but what they mean is that they're looking at cars that get better gas mileage. They're looking at electric cars maybe for their next one, or they're altering their plans. They're looking, they're saying, I'm looking at the price of a car, a train, a car, a bicycle ride, or some other kind of vacation, and I'm choosing a different one because of how gas prices are affecting the economy. But
But
that's the way market forces are supposed to work.
but for the most part, they're probably living their life pretty much like they were 3 months ago or 3 years ago. They're still drinking a beer with a buddy, or they're still going on a hunting trip, or they're still doing, they're doing stuff that they do.
As long as they have a job, as long as they still have the same job they had 3 months
Yeah.
ago or 3 years
Okay.
ago. But
So the
I
U.
don't mean to say that people aren't being squeezed. But the other thing is that we're sending market signals right now. This is something that's already happening in the economy where people are saying, you know what, if this is how much this thing costs, I'm just not doing it. you know, and that's the way inflation gets turned around is like I said, I have a job and I have a paycheck, but I look at how much things cost in California and we just don't go out to eat anymore. I took my kids to a walk-up taco stand that where we used to go when the kids were little.
You mean just a taco truck thing?
Yeah, but it's built in. It's in a
Okay.
building, right? But it's a
All right.
walk-up window.
All right.
And when the kids were little, we used to eat there and it would be about 25 bucks for the three of us.
Okay.
It's $80. It was
Oh, it cannot be
$84. It
$80.
was $84 to get
$84 for three of you?
$84
How
to
many beers did the three of you drink?
zero.
Oh my God.
That was three burritos and three fountain drinks.
You are making this up.
No, I don't. Again, I'm in California where we doubled the minimum wage and we doubled it again for food workers. So maybe in the rest of the country you don't realize just how expensive going out to eat is now. And that's a taco truck,
Yeah,
basically.
I thought it's expensive in Colorado. I truly think it's, I mean, I still go out to eat, but boy, is this expensive.
Yeah,
That's
I
crazy.
mean, when we go to like, actually, it's funny. Like, we'll sometimes go to some place like McDonald's, and it'll be $62.
Yeah, for McDonald's. Yeah.
And the idea that a family of three, by the way, not a huge family, but that three people can spend $60 at McDonald's is
Yeah.
crazy.
I don't understand that. And I have no idea what a California college PhD professor history professor makes, but I assume it's a good standard of living. But,
Yeah.
but,
Uh,
but still, that's too much money for,
right. So what do we do? We just don't go there.
yeah.
I mean, this week, I mean, in it, probably 3 years ago, we would have gone out to eat once to fast food and once to a restaurant. And this past week, we went out zero times.
Yeah, fascinating. So this is all under the US and our 250th year is good. Sounds like it's almost suffering, but you're saying we're still in the
But I'm
good.
just saying it is, I'm sending the market signal.
Okay.
Hey, if somebody's willing to pay these prices, I guess
Go at
way
it.
to go. Maybe they must make 700 grand a year.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
matter to them. And
Right.
I just when I see people ordering DoorDash from fast food restaurants, I just think, well, that must be some rich people.
Right.
You know.
Did I Did I skip one, Professor? We went from suffering to okay. America's okay, or did I go to
Yeah.
good?
I think we did suffering and okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to, let's switch gears. America's good in our 250th year. Talk to
Yeah.
us.
Well, again, compared to the rest of the world, we're also the most powerful country on earth. We are the reserve currency for the world.
Isn't
Uh,
that changing? Are you sure we're not suffering under that? I thought the,
well, I'm just saying, if we don't fix anything,
okay.
that won't be true in 2037.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Keep going on
but
good.
what's that?
Keep going on good.
Oh, but as of right now, the entire world basically depends on the economy of the United States being good. So it's in the interest of the world for the economy of the United States to be good. Um,
What are we still about a quarter of the whole world's GDP, the 330 million of us?
yeah, but there's a more important function even than that, which is that um, activity can still flow through institutions that really function well. So it's not just um, the size of the American economy. It's also the way we function in the world, where we allow honest business transactions to um, uh, to keep moving throughout the global economy.
So we're still good because of that. If the US wasn't around, there would be a much more
Oh,
anarchy.
we're good for for some other reasons. I would say we're good because already we're seeing federalism work where states like Mississippi all of a sudden are able to turn their education system around. Places like Tennessee and Ohio are able to create these civic education institutions and what ends up happening in these circumstances is the failing institutions in other places will eventually cease to be the elite institutions, but it's a slow and painful process. But democracy and federalism actually works, and so yeah, the fact that places like California are being pushed to the breaking point is, the same thing happened in Michigan, and these things are choices that states make that they don't have to make, and when other states choose to not do them, it means that people say, you know what, forget it. I'm going to Utah. Like I'm going to Colorado, or actually, Colorado is getting a little crowded for my taste now.
No,
But
actually, we've gone down this last year, the first time in a long time, or ever.
yeah, or, I'm looking for a place to live in some non-hot place in Arizona,
Right.
you know, uh, And and I also think that what happens is that people discover that every place in the United States, there's a way that the people who live there make it pretty good. You know, you just have to get into the lifestyle of the people who live there. Other things I would say are good is that we still have our foundational documents and our history. They're all still there, waiting for somebody to pick them up and run with them and apply them again. We do have these traditions and we also have the institutions themselves. It's pretty remarkable that even though we've had people in some cases actively trying to destroy them, they're all still standing and functioning, or at least on a basic level. And you know, the amount of capital that still exists in the United States and just sort of washes over um, um, innovation is still pretty remarkable. That when somebody has a good idea that seems to make money, that billions and if not tens of billions and trillions of dollars will get dumped on it. And just wealth can cover up a lot of problems. I mean, that's why California continues to even exist. is there's just so much wealth here that we can. How about the stat that has been blowing away everybody lately is that the state of California spends somewhere between 40 and $50,000 a year per homeless person every year. So, like, how rich is your state and how high are your taxes when you can afford to spend? And I mean, the estimate that was able to come up with was about $47,000 a year per homeless person. Now, for somebody who at the end of the year is still homeless, you know, but having that much money circulating and being washing across a state can cover up a lot of problems. And America is still a wealthy country.
Well,
What
it's all
else?
in the good category. Oh, you
Yeah,
still have
yeah.
good? All
Pardon?
right. Yeah, let's transition. You can go back to some of the suffering. Okay, good.
Okay.
Let's see if there's anything great in our 250th year. What is great about America, Professor?
I mean, the greatest thing is the greatest things are associated with the fact that our founding ideals are true. I mean, that's the greatest
After
thing.
250 years, they weren't a lark. It wasn't just a.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I think Calvin Coolidge really nailed um, better than almost anybody, which is that if if your founding ideals are true, you really don't have to be afraid of anything. I mean, you don't have to be afraid that somehow you're going to discover someday that all men are created equal was a lie, was wrong. That you can live your whole life trying to implement all men are created equal, all just government comes from the consent of the governed, um, rule of law, uh, and liberty to all, inalienable rights. And you can do that for your entire life, and you will never have to be ashamed or embarrassed about how you lived your life. That there isn't going to be some new theory that comes along and supplants that and says, "Oops, you were wrong." Here's something better than equality. Here's something better than rights of the individual. It's not going to happen.
So,
And
Professor, as a side story on that, what percentage, a ballpark guess, yeah, I'm sure you'll be wrong, but a guess on the percentages of country to this day that are controlled by a gun, that they either took over in a revolution, or they are a military dictator, or they morphed the semi-democracy into a totalitarian regime. I mean, the opposite of what you're talking about. What is great is America. They have to be worried every day. That's how they took power, by a gun, and somebody else might kill them.
yeah, it breaks down to about a third, a third, a third. You know, that we would say that about a third of countries are essentially not free and that don't have that are ruled more or less by violence, and then a third are sort of in the middle group that are either ascending or descending. There were countries that used to be free that have some serious challenges, or there are countries that used to be totalitarian dictatorships, but maybe are showing signs of moving in the right direction. But about a third of the countries on Earth are
So,
mostly free, and in
so
most,
they're great, like America as well, in our 250th year.
yeah,
That
yeah,
one.
yeah, and in some cases free. And this is the in some ways maybe we should be embarrassed by it, but in other ways maybe we should take pride in it that there are a lot of countries now that are freer than the United States. You know, that we're no that they've essentially adopted American ideals and in some ways are more American than America.
So you kind of believe those stats? At least the last time I looked, we were 27th out of the 180.
Well, it's hard because, the Heritage Foundation went nuts. But they used to have kind of the best
Freedom Index.
ongoing tracking of that. So you have to kind of go back to the last numbers from before Heritage went nutty.
Okay. What else is great about America besides our founding ideals that are still valid today?
Well, the culture of the American people, there's still an underlying culture of the American people that recognizes justice and wants fairness and is horrified when something unfair or unjust is placed in front of us. You know that
So we're not ruthless barbarians. We're not
no,
in Anarchyville. We actually have a basic sense of decency.
no, and we can put it this way: um, you can watch Indiana Jones and know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. You know, um, that most Americans can watch Schindler's List or
Yeah.
Saving Private Ryan or The Searchers or True Grit or whatever, and recognize who the good guys are and who the bad guys are.
Okay. What else, Professor? What else? We got culture and founding ideals, a creedal nation.
Well,
What?
almost everything flows from that. So everything else that is great, that is positive, that could allow the United States to turn itself around, is derived from that wellspring
Okay. Do you
of
want to
culture.
do you want to go back and revise any of your questions on whether America is suffering? Okay, good or great. Now that you've covered all those four broad categories.
I guess I would just say that there's probably a million things I left out
Okay.
in every category, of course, just
Okay. Well, let me ask this then. I am confused by friends and foe alike that we seem to be fighting not a phantom fight, but it's the wrong fight. And so I want you to help me with perspective because I'm trying to sort it out in my own head. I get being, and you mentioned it, and what's wrong with America? We're suffering because two branches out of three are not functioning well. So I get being mad at the president. I'm occasionally mad at the president, maybe even often mad at the president. I get that. I'm occasionally and often mad at my own congressman and all of Congress together. I get that. But it seems like to take president and Congress, the executive, and to say America is suffering seems to be it's just alien to me. I mean, and I'm going to your good part on federalism. It's two of the three branches. It's not all of the executive branch. It's the leader, perhaps, and some cabinet members and some loyal staffers. But it's not 3 million a million members of the military and a million in the reserves and a million civil servants. It's not. They are fascists. They're not fascists. They have a job. And some
Mhm.
of them are good, and some of them are bad, and some of them are lazy, and some work hard, and some may be fascist. I don't know, the whole mess of humanity. But it's not us. America is us, 330 million people, and it's 50 states. It's the federalism. And so I was going to do some research, which I didn't, taking all the state government budgets, all the city and county budgets, and all the special district budgets all throughout America and compare that to the federal government budget just to see, like when we say the government's a mess. Well, which government? All governments or some, and it seems to me we're just living our life by one man and his Truth Social. And I don't think that's healthy for us to be doing that. I just don't think you can say America's suffering or okay or good or great based off two of the three branches of the federal government. So tell me, am I wrong? Should I be more alert and attuned or give me some perspective in history, Professor.
Well, I would say there is a sort of trickle down effect. We do have a president who is both the head of state and the head of government. And we perhaps do, not perhaps, we do invest too much in um, how the president um, projects himself. Uh, However, it is true that there's kind of a trickle down effect because of um, people people follow what they perceive as success, and what ultimately creates culture is who your heroes are. And if Donald Trump is your hero, if that's what you're trying to be, well, you're trying to be a bad person. And I would say even at the state and local and city and county level, if you were just to offer me, would you like to swap out the city council, the county board of supervisors, your state senator, your state rep, and your congressman from now versus 15 years ago, I
Hmm.
would take 15 years ago.
Okay, so would I. Huh.
I
And
think,
you think that's a trickle down effect of just one man out of 330?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
330 million. Professor, I want to counter. I want to punch you back and see if you can knock me down again. Um, if we're a creedal nation, which we are, I'm a believer in that. And a month or two ago, maybe three or four,
Bill Gorsuch just said it 2 days ago.
I know it was great. I posted on
It
that.
was like,
Right? Yeah.
Clarence Thomas said it a week ago.
Yeah, they're on a public PR tour, it looks like.
Yeah,
But let's not go there yet,
yes, sir.
at least for this show. Um, I a couple months ago, you gave this whole beautiful storytelling about, well, what's your definition of success or truth if you're a religious person? None of this matters. None of it. Zero of it matters.
Yeah.
It was much better than that. We'll have to look it up, but it was really articulate. And then you a couple minutes ago you go, well, that's the great thing about America is we're a creedal nation. We're based on an idea that's still in existence today, 250 years later. So I listened to you saying, well, it circles down and what's success. And I go, I don't care. I don't care if Trump's a big meanie. I don't care if he's a fascist. I do. I'm going to vote against him. I'll work against him. I'll do things, but it's not going to let me ruin my life. I'm not going to let him dominate my morning and my midday and my afternoon and my son. I'm not going to sleep bad over. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to volunteer the appropriate amount of civic energy into finding somebody else better. And anyone that's closely aligned with him, I'll oppose. Anyone that's has to be aligned with him out of necessity, I guess I'll tolerate. And anybody that stands up to him, I'll say they're a hero, as long as they're part of the Creedal Nation crowd. And if they're just being a jerk, if they're another form of authoritarian, I don't want them either. So I think we spend too much time on the personality. As a couple of weeks ago, we went principles, policy, party, politics, and personality. And you're telling me, nope, John, we have to work on personality. And one person out of 330 million is going to change the culture and character of 330 million of us. And I say, no, that's incorrect. So punch back.
Well, I would say we have to recognize that it's going to have that effect, but it also doesn't have to have that effect. That you can and you are actually in charge of this. So, just to bring it back to our founding ideals, we often use this phrase liberty to all, but you need to understand that that doesn't, sometimes we shorten that to be freedom, but that's not actually the thing that has to be taught. We don't have to teach people, you should get to do whatever you want, right? What the thing that has to be taught is you have to protect the rights of other people. And what that means is that, for instance, when you think about like how you conceive of yourself, your own identity, you get to be in charge of how you perceive yourself. And it doesn't need to be defined by Donald Trump. But at the same time, you have to preserve the right of somebody else to say, I think that's wrong. I don't want to worship Jesus. I want to worship Donald Trump. And you have to say, well, okay. But, your worship of Donald Trump d doesn't have to have anything to do with my worship of Jesus Christ. Yeah, you know, my God isn't on this world. Yours is. Um, but as long as we're respecting one another, I don't, and I can't, and I don't want control over your mind. That's and the people who I think really influenced me more than well, actually, one person in particular I know I've mentioned before is James Weldon Johnson, and just reading a lot of his work from the late 19th, early 20th century. well, especially early 20th century. But the just making sure that you are in charge of your own mind. But that also means that the other person gets to be in charge of their minds too. And we can try to convince them and work with them because we live in society. But the thing that has to be preserved is the autonomy of both of us. So, yeah, both things you said are true and can exist simultaneously.
Okay. Are those analogy stories of pluralism? Are those kind of
Yeah.
defining pluralism?
I mean, if you think about it, like the stuff that, we say the American people are this thing. Well, I don't think there's a single American who is can define themselves as a single thing. You know, I don't know how I feel now is going to be different than how I feel when I'm fighting traffic or when it's hot or I'm tired or I'm hungry or thirsty or somebody just cut me off in traffic or I saw them litter out the window or turn their stereo up loud or um, and all of a sudden we'll be like, oh, this is what society is like. And you're going to feel very differently about the state of the world when you're up in the mountain air doing a little, home improvement.
Yeah. So I can't quite tell out of all this, Professor, and then let's get to some Q&A for a few minutes. I can't quite tell if I started this conversation that I'm optimistic. And I can't quite tell whether you're optimistic or not. After you went through all this series of the status of America, you gave a sentence that we might not exist after a while. A lot of my friends, particularly liberal ones, think we may not exist for after a while. I have the opinion that come hell or high water, we're going to exist. Thank you very much. And it's our job to fight that we're going to maintain our founding ideals that are worth fighting for. So I'm going to make sure that happens. And I may not, I'm one guy out of 330 million, but I'm going to be a pretty damn effective guy to make sure we still have our founding ideals out of 250 years. So I'm optimistic because of the fight, not that there's not danger. There's always danger. I'm concerned. There's all sorts of stuff. So I'm an optimistic, even in the face of all sorts of stuff going on. What are you? Are you? Yeah, we're doing okay. You said yes to all the above, but what are you really?
Well, I would say we've faced incredible challenges in the past to our founding ideals. And first, racism, scientific racism, Darwinism, progressivism, fascism, socialism, every one of these things, modernity, every one of these things was a challenge to our ideals and our institutions, every one of them. And some of them we handled better than others. Uh, but we have managed to recover from each of these challenges. Uh, and for many years, I would brag that the United States had yet to fall victim to populism. And I would say, even though, it's the thing we're most susceptible to, our system has managed. And then that's why when Donald Trump came along, I was like, this is a unique threat. We have no defense against this.
Well,
Uh,
you gave a couple speeches on that to Republican clubs about that. What you're talking about right now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And I said, we have, our system actually has no defense for someone who comes along who's like this. Uh, so this is a big deal, and I tried to warn people as much as I could. Nobody listened. And um, so, am I optimistic? Well, I would say the all the good choices are right in front of us.
I love that line. All the good choices are right in front of us. I love that. Keep going.
And what we have to do is choose them. Uh, and once we start doing that, we will start digging our way out of all of these challenges one by one. Uh, because we have overcome larger challenges than the ones that we currently face. But I think it is appropriate to be worried because of how many people aren't turning to our founding ideals as the solution, as the the path. I shouldn't say solution,
Yeah.
but it's the path that begins to work through these challenges.
And that's Coolidge's famous quote that you've used often, right?
Yeah, but it's not just Coolidge. I want to also point out that like we wouldn't say Ronald Reagan was perfect. And I just gave a lecture yesterday called The Failures of Ronald Reagan and Conservatism in the 1980s. But I think that Reagan did buy America about another 50 years. That's not nothing. That he managed to put America on a different trajectory that we've kind of been living off of since the 1980s in so many ways. Um, and i- if we don't get another Reagan, uh, it's not to say that if we don't get another Reagan, the wheels are going to come off. But if we go another 20 years without a Reagan or an Eisenhower or a Coolidge or a McKinley or a Hayes or a Grant or a
No,
Lincoln or
no Democrats, not a single Democrat, Professor?
well, I mean, I guess I should, in honor of Franklin Roosevelt, I should make the argument of my old advisor that um, FDR was necessary for the survival of representative government and representative
One
institutions.
one Democrat you threw in out of
Yeah,
our
it's just hard for me because there was so much fascism in the New Deal that and his the third term and court packing. Those are the fascism, the court packing, and the third term, um, and the fact that the New Deal was such a spectacular failure in terms of economic policy. Um, it, well, that's just policy. I
yeah,
shouldn't
right.
criticize that, but the other things are pretty fundamental that it's hard for me to. But I don't know. It was how we challenged. It was how we handled that particular challenge. And it is important to note that even though, um, there were people in his administration and there were things about fascism that he admired, um, he did not choose to take dictatorial control when he could have. And I don't think the same would be the case for Donald Trump. Like, if Donald Trump had the opportunity to seize power that Franklin Roosevelt had, I think he would have taken it. Um, and whereas FDR did not, um, he still worked through democratic institutions. Um,
So we're kind of going back to your original when I asked if the U.S. is suffering okay, good, or great in our 250th year, and your answer was yes. You're sticking with that, and you're saying I like the way you're concluding though that all the good choices are right in front of us. Our job is to choose them and start making progress towards solving problems.
yeah, America is good, great, and suffering.
Okay. Let's go to some Q&A, Professor. Do you, Susan, you're up, or Sandon? And Sandon, I know you've typed out some questions, but I'd prefer you ask them verbally if you're willing. So either Susan or Sandon, jump in. Jump in, Sandon.
Sure. First of all, thank you again, guys, because I'm sorry I haven't been here. Some stuff happened over the last few weeks and I haven't been able to come in. Um, I like John. I like your statement that all the good choices are in front of us. We just have to pick them up
That
and
was
run with
Professor.
them.
I was just repeating it, but
Yeah,
thank
yeah. I know it came from Professor Tootle. So we have a culture. Do you think there's enough of the sentiment left in the culture towards creedalism, towards justice and fairness and rule of law? Is that enough of a bulwark against populism?
I'm certain of it. Professor, you're the expert, though. You're the historian. Tell us that answer for Sandon.
I think some of those oars are already rowing in states. And so we're seeing federalism really be the vehicle for this now, because in individual states, you are starting to see pushback, and it's imperfect. Gosh, it's and sometimes it's terrible, but that's the way this stuff works. Is people go too far and make mistakes, and then it gets adjusted, you know. But I think that um, um, that essentially the American people have become so frustrated with the education system that they're pushing back in their individual lives in ways that can't be ignored. And we're seeing just a tremendous amount of experimentation at every level of school, you know, from homeschooling to charter schools to public schools to grade schools, junior highs, high schools, colleges, teacher training. All of these things are kind of people are trying all kinds of different things in order to try to recapture this essential thing that is um, teaching American history and American civic ideals. Um, it hasn't taken hold yet, but you can see the seeds of it. So
And is that education? Is that an analogy or an example of federalism and what's reaction to what's going on in the federal government level?
it's an example, and it's also, I think, the literal answer. It does come down to education. Um,
What about
and
re-education? Like not, I mean, you're talking about children that's 20 years off. What about adults?
yeah, I think it's the same. If you look at the explosion of well, podcasts for one thing, and
Ah,
where people are seeking out and wanting to know what's actually authoritative. You know, that we're so conditioned now. We've seen so much misinformation that now we're looking for, um, well, I know this, I'm seeing this video, but is it legitimate? You know, and people, I think, are searching for authoritative information. And I was actually talking about this with some of my friends because they were saying one thing that has survived is the business news. You know, it's a funny thing within,
money.
yeah, because if you are running a business, you need to actually know what's going on,
Yeah.
and you're willing to pay for that. And thus, in a way, the market is kind of working itself out. You know, I saw one report, I don't know if it's true, that Tucker Carlson only has about 7,000 paid subscribers.
Wow.
You know, that's, I mean, any mid-sized newspaper in any town in America dwarfs that in terms of paid subscribers. And even if it's off by a factor of 10, you know, even if it's 70,000, right? You just kind of need to reassess who's actually influential in people's lives every day. Um,
So the implication there is that you could pool data. If you can come up with a definition of this podcast is authoritative, you can watch trends to see if people are migrating, assuming it stays authoritative. I mean, in my mind, I'm holding Joe Rogan's show, and I've never thought of it as authoritative, but boy, he gets a lot of subscribers,
yeah,
and he
well,
says crazy things, in my opinion.
yeah. But the positive example I would say is SCOTUS blog. You know, for so long, every single headline about every single Supreme Court case is essentially wrong. And you can just point people like, just go to SCOTUS blog. They have people who actually summarize what the case is. And if, yeah, I bet each of those individuals has some kind of an ideological bias, but their ideological bias is so far buried beneath the challenge of just trying to explain something that's actually complicated that anybody would be better off by just ignoring whatever headline you just saw about, about the Supreme Court. And if you're actually interested, just go to SCOTUS blog. It's great. And if you are interested, now if you want to just make up stuff and live your life by a bunch of lies, then by all means, go sick. But I will judge you for that, and you can judge me for what I do. I mean, that's kind of gets back to the point I was talking about with John. Like you get to judge me for reading SCOTUS blog, and I get to judge you for, clicking on whatever the clickbait headline was.
For what it's worth, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Hey, Sandon, you missed the first couple of minutes of the show, but I would stereotype you as saying, man, we're in trouble. America's in trouble, trouble, trouble. About 40% of my friends, I would put you in that group. And did you hear much of what the professor said? The answer is yes. We're in trouble. We're also got good things. We've got bad
I
things. Did
I
he persuade you
probably
any?
I guys, the reason I come here is because you attempt to reason based on information that you can say, here's my sources and stuff like that. So that's the reason I had, my main concern is culture.
Yeah.
And Professor Tootle, I mean, you gave me something very, very different today because I've long looked at Hollywood and thought, eh, especially, and just what it's done to the culture. I'm being over the top on
Yeah.
that.
No, no, but I think you're
But you
right.
said they also promulgated this message of you know who the good guys and the bad guys are. And there's Professor Sarah Payne. I don't know if you know of her, but I've watched several. I like her stuff. And w several weeks ago, one was about on average how cruel, like there are cultures that you can kind of I'm building on what you said, but you can how cruel are people able to be each other in general in the culture? That's not America. We give a damn. And I put tremendous, and you know what? Hollywood was Hollywood and all of that, but they did a lot of no. Communities important, fairness, honesty, justice, rule of law. They don't say it as rule, but these are important. And that's very, very deeply dug into the culture. And I'm incredibly thankful for that.
And in particular, I think a couple of people deserve a shout out, John Ford and Steven Spielberg. These two filmmakers really both took a civic they had a civic angle to the arc of their career. They really thought they were there to I'm talking about Steven Spielberg as if he's dead, but he's still alive. He's still making movies. Um, but he really took his civic role seriously. That the arc of his movies is supposed to reaffirm the essential truths of the American founding in each one of them in a different way. And John Ford was the same way. And I will say that you saw this happen in the marketplace. I was talking about this with my kids last night, how we just kind of stopped watching movies because they weren't that good, they weren't that entertaining, and every one of them felt like it was just some sort of message that was being shoved down my throat, you know? Uh, and then all of a sudden, was that movie come out with Ryan Gosling and The Martian? Oh, and everybody went and watched it. And you want to know,
Yeah.
people liked it. And all of a sudden, because, theoretically, people in Hollywood would like to make money, people are like, hey, maybe we need to make entertaining films that people want to see again. Um, and I don't know, that's the way the marketplace works. I mean, it's slow and it's frustrating, because but what do we do? We vote with our ballots and we vote with our dollars.
And we vote with our feet. Yeah.
Yeah, we vote with our feet, we vote with our dollars, we vote with everything. We're creating culture. I mean, there's something Eisenhower said is that there are so many problems that can only be solved in the human heart. And every person with how you live your life every day, that's when you're doing the work of America. When you make liberty to all a living fact for every single person, you're doing the work of America. But it's not something that you can hand off to someone else, right? It's something that each individual has to do, and government can't do this for you either. You know, there are
My
limits.
quote from last week:
Good
"You can't
point.
outsource citizenship."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I,
All
I
right.
was thinking instead of lawyers, guns, and money, it's ballot, feet, and dollars.
There you go. That's the
We,
best-selling book we should write right there.
right. We've got a new business model right from
Guns,
today.
germs, and steel, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we close out, I want to see if Susan has any questions or comments.
First of all, Professor Tootle, I totally commiserate with your taco experience in California. My children and grandchildren live in LA and Santa Cruz, respectively. I've been out to dinner with them, and it is atrocious. And I yeah, so I
Yep.
commiserate for sure. And I I know I responded on your post, John, about how I felt about the suffering, okay, good, and great. And the one thing in talking about, why aren't more politicians campaigning for the country, for the Constitution, for all of that, is there is one element missing, and that's ego. They do what is best for them in a lot of these cases. And, maybe not so much backbone, but a lot of ego. I mean, what do you do in terms of news, spreading news, when the president of this country announces publicly that Pope Leo wants Iran to have nuclear weapons? What do you say when you know I mean, all of us who have a brain know that that's not true, but we're not necessarily the um the majority of the population. Those of us who are seeking authoritative information, I don't know if we're the majority.
Okay, excellent comments, Professor. Some reactions to her comments.
Yeah. I think it in a way ties back with everything we've been discussing today, which is that culture is determined by who your heroes are. And if you have the wrong heroes, you're going to make bad decisions. And when the only way a human being can understand the world is through stories. And that's why stories are important. That's why narrative is important. There's a story that we tell ourselves about who we are. There's a story that we tell ourselves about the way that or I should say, there are stories we tell ourselves about who we are. There are stories we tell ourselves about the way the world works. And when there are people out there with command of the nation's attention who are dum-dums. And
Boy, that's a politically correct, nice word for all the statements that he's
I don't
made.
know dopes. I mean, doofuses, dorks, people with, butternut squash for brains, with bad character. Of course, it's that's going to find its way into our stories about who we are and what we are as a nation. It's
Yeah,
unavoidable.
that's insightful. But that doesn't have to be the story. It just happens to be a thread that
Right.
is
But we
powerful.
also have to, I would say, like, the only thing to do is to stay constantly focused on your own autonomy, making sure that you're in charge of your own brain. You decide, um, who to grant uh, permission to take over your own brain.
Is that all a takeoff honoring James Weldon Johnson?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
But not
Is there
just James Weldon Johnson, Frederick Douglass and Du
Eric
Bois
Douglas?
and um,
Do you have
Ralph Ellison, probably.
do you,
Robinson is another person who's great on this issue. She's still alive,
who
and
is
she's
it?
a great lady. Marilyn Robinson.
I
Uh,
haven't read any of
she,
hers.
she's probably, and I don't, I mean, I really mean this. She might be the most brilliant living person.
And I don't even know her.
She's
Marilyn Robin.
Marilyn Robinson. Yeah, I think she's one of the few true geniuses alive. And
Is
uh,
there a treatise or a book or a
well,
Substack?
she's written, she became famous as a novelist. She wrote the book Housekeeping, which was even made into a movie, but she's written a bunch of books, essays. She has essays, she's a writer, so all she does
Okay.
is write.
I'll
Um,
look her up. If we were to read one or two of, and I know there's probably 50 of Frederick Douglass, but if we were to read one or two, maybe on extreme examples, or two or three of the best examples of Frederick Douglass, what would you recommend to us?
I'm going to go from left field here, and I don't know what it's called, but his last major address before he died, and it was a speech he gave at a school.
Okay.
Um, just because it, I like it because it shows the again the arc of how different he was um, by the end of his life from things he had said 10 years before that, 20 years before that, 30 years before that, that I like it because it shows how we never stop evolving as thinkers and how independent he was about his own thought. That he was always pushing himself to go to the sort of next conclusion. And one of the things I like about this final statement of his is he says, something along the lines of like, we need to stop being race men, was the phrase from it. That you know, it's time for us to argue for our humanity and not just think of ourselves as being members of a race. Even though, and at the time that he said that, that was sort of at the high point of scientific racism. So, and that was and it was his last. I can't remember the name of the.
We'll
I wish
find a
Was
link.
it
I
was
could
it
find it. Yeah.
lessons of
And
the
then
hour?
and Marilyn Robinson was the other author I mentioned.
Did you hear that from Sandin? Lessons of the Hour.
That might be. Yeah, it was the final major
Parliament
speech.
speech.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably it.
Oh, good job, Sandin. Yeah, appreciate you. Okay, and then one from James Weldon Johnson, a poem or a treatise.
I'll just I'll recommend reading his novel, The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. It'll change you. You'll be a different person after you read that book.
I
And
still haven't read it. Okay, I'm going to try to make that a priority.
and don't think that it's not this thing that I was just condemning. It's not one of these things that beats you over the head with an overbearing message that is just obvious and cliched. Like it's a good book. It's entertaining. You'll like reading it.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, we're going to wind down, Professor. Thank you very much for the next 6 months. If you'll help me campaign for America.
I don't think I ever stop.
Excellent answer. Excellent answer. We all need to be doing that. We can't stop. It's an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
All right, Professor. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Susan.